Jewish. And what that means for me, or part of what that means for me, is that from just before when the sun goes down on Friday night to when you can see 3 stars, or when you presumably could see 3 stars in the sky on Saturday night, the next night, I rest. I don't do work. I don't create. I don't do. I let go of the reins, and I try to let go of my ego. And this is a wildly difficult thing to do. It sounds lovely, but to be able to sit and do nothing per se, more difficult than I would have ever imagined. Another piece of being a Jew is that I have a responsibility to take care of the world around me. I am obligated to take care of the people who are most vulnerable, your orphans, your widows, people who don't have a voice, people whose voices are quiet or unheard. And in addition to having to be fruitful and multiply, one also has an obligation that's not spoken of as much to protect the ability of other life to be able to also multiply, be fruitful and multiply, which complicates things a little bit and helps us all of a sudden have to look at things in terms of your triple bottom line perspectives, your environment, your economy, and your society. But perhaps that is what got me into the other side of my life, which is probably how more of you are more familiar with me, which is as an analyst. I love my numbers, and somewhere down the road I thought, if I had good numbers, peer-reviewed data, excellent support from the scientific communities, that I could put together objective policy arguments that I could bring to the table for climate discussions in particular. It had always worked for me. It worked great in graduate school. In the real world, it really isn't that. Turns out it's a little more nuanced. And I was quick to figure out other people to blame for that. I decided that when science all of a sudden turned into science and became foggy, I recognized, wait a minute, that looks more like marketing than science to me. Okay, I'm going to blame industry for that because, here are some folks who serve to benefit if they don't ever get to see climate policy legislation come to fruition. Super, okay, there's one person to blame. All right, I felt a little better. Then I thought, I could also blame the scientists. Dick White, Councilman Dick White. There's all this talk about how, the scientists, they get in their high and mighty spot and they speak a different language and they speak down to the lay people and they, when are they going to actually learn to communicate like normal humans? And I think it's epitomized in my dear friend Betsy Nord. She's our lab director here at Fort Lewis College. She's got the bumper sticker, "Back off, man, I'm a scientist." I think, there's a little bit of that going on, and that's great. So I got to blame them too. That felt pretty good. Until I recognized that I was a little remiss in my duties, and I actually hadn't blamed myself, which was a bummer. I hadn't meant to do that. But it was true. And I'm going to tell you a little bit how I got to that. So I was on my way to, I meant to phrase this, it was torn because this is something my mother would do. A funny thing happened to me on the way to the Climate Policy Forum. And it's a horrible thing to say, but I said it. I was on my way to discuss local regional climate policy with a group of people who I thought might kill me when I got there. And I actually had visions of these folks having Molotov cocktails in their bags, maybe shoes, whatever they could find to throw at me when I got up there, as I tried to present information that I thought was valuable and objective. But I knew they were going to hate it the second I got there. And I thought to myself, the fears that people are having and the concerns that people have that manifest themselves in the kind of anger that we're seeing in the climate dialogue is legitimate. I can't say that all of what it's based on is for real, but the fear and what people are feeling in their heart, the defensiveness about it, is real. And when we ignore it, or we take away the value of the fear that people have, we're discrediting ourselves. And so I realized that. I said, okay, great. I'm going to have a conversation with that guy and his Molotov cocktail. That's going to be it. I'm going to try to get to his heart. And I'm going to try to find out what is at the root. What are you afraid of? Why does this make you so virulent and angry that you can't listen to what I'm saying? I wanted to create a dialogue. And I thought that was a pretty noble cause. Seemed okay. And the man with the Molotov cocktail essentially says to me, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. And I thought, okay, that's fair. You want to know my fears and where my heart is? That's great, because that's what I want to know from you. Hang on, let me try to find it. I know I have heart in this somewhere, but just a minute. I don't have it right here. I don't think it's quite in my bag, and I know it's not in my PowerPoint presentation. And then it occurred to me that I wasn't sure where it was. It was then, this is going to sound like a tangent, I guess it is, I came across an article, it was actually a response. Wendell Berry was responding to someone who had issued an article about the value of reducing the work week, shortening it to 4 days instead of 5. And Wendell Berry's response, as I will now butcher, was something to the extent of, we're not addressing the right problem. It's not an issue of needing a shorter work week. It's an issue of how we're working and where our hearts are in relation to that work. Because for him, and for probably one other person I know on this planet so far, he doesn't feel like his vocation is work. Because what he feels is that his heart is the designer for the work that his mind can then help to implement. And in that, it's just perfectly blended. And so it doesn't feel like work. And I thought, that's brilliant. I could never do that. I have no idea how to do that. So, as noble and wonderful and beautiful as I think Wendell Berry is, I was still a little bit at a loss as to how I was going to find my heart in this. And it was then that well, now I'll tell you, the other way I identify myself is I'm a cook. Maybe a foodie, I don't know. Cook's Illustrated is probably my favorite magazine in the world. And I turned to Cook's Illustrated for some advice. So who here makes vinaigrettes pretty regularly? Delicious vinaigrette, homemade? Yeah. What you need to do, the critical piece, is you're blending a liquid like vinegar with an oil. And you have to do what's called an emulsion, where you're forcing these elements that are naturally opposing to be together, the oil and the liquid. And you're supposed to rigorously, physically shake this to get the pieces to come together. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, I was just like, okay, is this my head and my heart we're talking about? Maybe Wendell Berry is just like the perfect vinaigrette. He's perfectly blended. How can I do that? Well, okay, so I keep reading, and what it says is as you're pouring in the oil, which I'm now thinking of as the head, and the brain, and the work, and the ego. And for me, and maybe other people have it differently, for me it's the visual. I see things, and I want to do with them, and I want to create with them. So I'm pouring all that in on top of my heart. And they say, when you see oil pool on the top, you need to stop. Stop pouring in the oil altogether and whisk for a while. And I was like, oh, of course. I've been buried under oil, and I haven't been whisking. So, back to the Sabbath. The Sabbath, for me, is the stopping. It is the official stopping of oil, work, brain, ego being poured into me so that I can physically blend my heart with my head, so that I can come out of my day of rest, my day of letting go of the reins, my day of not creating, my day of smelling and hearing and tasting the bread and the wine, hearing the wind in the trees, feeling my son's moist skin as he's getting over a fever, smelling the spring river. It's that day that finally blends it all back together. In doing so, I am finally able to go back to my man with the Molotov cocktail. Actually, probably was a woman. And when he or she says to me, I'll show you mine if you show me yours, I'm actually in a much better position to do so, because my heart has been accessed. So while I imagine there are a million ways to do this, I do it through a regimented time of rest. For me, it's a spiritual thing. Sustainability in action to me means it's time to stop and rest so that we can actually be and be with our hearts and have dialogue.